Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a huge technological shift happening in India, one that could totally change the daily lives of millions of retirees. It's all about ending a stressful annual ritual and bringing in a new automated system. Just think about this quote for a second. It really gets to the heart of a burden that India's elderly have carried for decades. The system has basically been built on this idea of distrust, forcing senior citizens year after year to prove they exist just to get the money they're owed. So let's unpack what that really means. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the annual burden itself. Then, we'll get into the new digital fix that's coming. We'll talk about the promise of what this could be, dignity, efficiency, all of that. But, and this is a big but, we also have to confront the real danger of what happens when a system like this goes wrong. And finally, we'll look at how you can actually build a system that people can trust. So, what is this problem we're actually talking about? Well, it's an annual ritual called the Life Certificate, or Jeevan Praman. And every single year, millions of pensioners have had to jump through all these hoops just to keep their payments from being cut off. For decades, this has meant you had to physically show up at a bank or go get a certificate from some government official just to say, hey, I'm still here. Now, just imagine how difficult that is for someone who's frail or bedridden or maybe lives in a really remote village. It's a massive, massive burden. And here's what's really fascinating. Even when they tried to fix this with a digital solution back in 2014, it didn't solve the fundamental problem. Nope, it just swapped one kind of burden for another. Instead of having to travel, suddenly you needed a smartphone, a solid internet connection, and you had to deal with biometric scanners that, let's be honest, often struggle to work for older people. And that's the bottom line. It doesn't matter if it's a physical form or a fancy biometric scan. The responsibility, the onus, is always on the senior citizen to prove they exist over and over again. And if you miss that yearly deadline for whatever reason, your income is cut off, just like that. Okay, so how is all this changing? Well, a new law from 2023 is about to completely flip this model on its head. And this isn't just some small update, this is a total rethinking of the whole process. This act right here is the catalyst for everything. It's moving India away from all these separate state-level records into one single national database that's supposed to be the source of truth for who's alive and who isn't. And by linking every death certificate to a person's unique Aadhaar ID, it creates an incredibly powerful new tool. So instead of the person having to go get a certificate and then submit it, the new system lets the pension agency just ask the database. They can just query it to check someone's status. And this shift perfectly illustrates a really important core idea. It's called the once-only principle. And this is a really profound change in philosophy. The state basically assumes you are alive unless a death certificate, which is only entered one single time, tells it you're not. The burden of proof finally moves off of the individual and onto the database. So what does this actually mean for people on the ground? Well, the potential upsides here are just enormous, and not just for the pensioners, but for the whole system. You know, the biggest, most immediate benefit is just restoring some dignity to the elderly. But the knock-on effects for efficiency are huge. This could seriously cut down on fraud from so-called ghost beneficiaries. It can make things like inheritance and bank settlements way smoother for families. And it could even help clean up things like voter rolls. And for the insurance companies and pension agencies, this is a game changer. It means a massive drop in the administrative headache of chasing down all that paperwork every single year. We're talking about potentially slashing their overhead by up to 60%. That is a huge, huge gain in efficiency. But with any automated system this powerful, there's always a risk. There's a catch. So what's the major downside here? What happens when the automation gets it wrong? This is, without a doubt, the most critical question in this whole discussion. The benefits of the system are clear, but the potential for error is, well, it's terrifying. What happens if a living, breathing person gets mistakenly marked as dead? It leads to this chilling concept called civil death. Now, it's not an official legal term, but it describes a very real nightmare. A simple data error says you're deceased, and boom, instantly, your pension stops, your bank accounts are frozen, your health insurance disappears. You are, for all intents and purposes, erased from the official world. And as you can see here, the causes can be shockingly simple. A clerical typo, a case of mistaken identity because two people have similar names, or even something more sinister, like someone committing fraud to try and grab your property. Any of these can trigger that devastating cascade of consequences. And here is the cruelest irony of all. To fix the mistake,
to prove you're not actually dead, you have to go through this difficult, in-person verification process. The very same kind of bureaucratic nightmare the whole automated system is supposed to get rid of in the first place.
So how can India possibly build a system like this while still protecting its citizens? Well, the answer isn't to just throw out the idea of automation. It's to build it smarter. And a big part of that is learning from what other countries have done and putting trust at the absolute center of the design. Other countries have been wrestling with this exact same problem, but they've come at it with very different philosophies. And looking at their approaches gives us some really valuable lessons. So on one hand, you've got the US and UK model. Their main focus is on fraud prevention and making government run more smoothly. The US even sells access to its death database to private companies. It's definitely efficient, but it's very much a government-first approach. Now let's contrast that with something else. The models in Estonia and Singapore are built completely around the citizen's experience. They're all about convenience for families dealing with a loss, and this is the crucial part in Estonia's case, radical transparency. Citizens there can see a log of every single time their data has been accessed, and that simple feature builds enormous public trust. So really, the path forward for India seems to be blending these ideas. You want the efficiency of the US model, but it has to be combined with the human-centric, transparent approach of a place like Estonia. It needs strong safeguards, real privacy protections, and most important of all, a very clear and easy way for people to correct errors when they inevitably happen. So, in the end, India is really at a crossroads. The technology offers this incredible promise of a future where the elderly are treated with dignity, free from all this bureaucratic hassle. But the challenge, the huge challenge, is to build that future on a foundation of trust and strength, to make sure that efficiency never, ever comes at the cost of a person's identity.